Council, do you hear now?
That's helpful, thank you. Maybe I should be at that council meeting.
So, no. Keep an eye out.
All right. You can,
All set?
can I just give Belle a little bit of instruction? Hey, Belle,
Yes,
we have Rob Yerxa joining us. When we get to the new business, will you elevate him to a panelist?
I sure will.
Great, okay. We're ready to start. I am sitting in for Councilor Perry, who's in Florida, and so we needed to have a council member who was on site. So I am only subbing tonight. I have subbed before, so I know what that feels like as council chair. So I just wanted to say that to our general public. Roll call shows that Jeff Wingard, Megan Gardner, myself are here in person, and Councilor Perry is
In a place that's warmer than
in
here.
a place that's warmer than here. So he's doing tonight, and I think that's all of us, right, so far. Okay. We have an agenda review. We have a motion, we have a addendum or an add-on to the agenda, order number 2249, that I believe we need a motion to add to the agenda. So moved. Okay, moved and seconded. And that will come under new business.
And I'll do the board.
Okay.
Council Perry?
In favor.
In favor? Council Robertson?
In favor.
Council Wingard?
In favor.
And there are 4 in favor and there are none opposed.
Should we, next on the agenda, should we wait?
Oh, I think she's here.
Okay. Our next agenda item is a presentation for Councilor Osher, who has decided not to run for town council again. But we would like to present this plaque. I don't know if you can see it. There's my camera. There's a camera there. I'd like to present this plaque as a honorarium to Councilor Lori for her 4.5 years of service as a public representative for the town of Orono. We wish her well on her venture as state representative, and I know that she will continue to be available to our public as she works to support District 123. So thank you, Lori, for your service to Orono Town Council.
Thank you so much.
And this will be here, I think, right?
Yeah, we'll leave that down front, Lori, so at your leisure, you can come pick it up.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Our next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes of February 14th. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Move approval.
Beat you to it, Tom. I'm fast. I'm
Here, so moved and approved, seconded, and
seconded by Tom.
by Jeff. And we need a vote.
Council Perry?
In favor.
Council Gardner? In favor? Council Osher?
In favor?
Council Robertson?
In favor.
And Council Wingard?
In favor.
And the vote is 5 in favor and they're none opposed.
Okay. And moving on to public hearings, we need a motion for each one. Nancy, is that how that works?
No, there's no motion for these, just a.
Okay. Okay.
Want me to go get you a gavel?
Yes. So public hearings, A, to consider a victualer's license for Legacy CP Maine LLC doing business as Wendy's Old Fashioned Hamburgers for Stillwater.
And I'm Patrick Gasty, Code Enforcement Officer. Also speaking on behalf of police and fire and the town clerk. And we are recommending approval.
Okay. Is there anyone in the public that we need to hear from? No?
Just close it.
Okay.
Close. Again.
Close, oh, okay, then we'll close public hearing A. Public hearing B, to consider changing the zoning map, 27-2 lots 118, 119, and 121, 39 Pine Street, which is the Orono Public Library, 10 Birch Street, which is the senior center, and related parking lot from medium density residential to village commercial, and that would be Kyle.
Everyone,
That is Kyle. I asked Belle, can you, yep, she's on it. I have a
I just
map.
want to make sure that your computer is muted, and I can't change you to panelist because we have too many Town of Oronos in.
Oh, okay.
Can you email it to me?
I sure can.
And do we want to do public hearing A, B, and C together? Or do we just-
Separate.
No, okay.
You start and I'll you start and I will get this.
hi everyone, Kyle Drexler, Town Planner. So this proposed zone change is for 3 lots. The library, Birch Street Senior Center, and a small 1/10 of an acre lot that's used largely for a few parking spaces and a drainage ditch mostly. The reason that this zone change was initially brought forward was the library was looking to do an expansion or an addition. And these 3 lots are currently located in the medium density residential district, which have a little bit more restrictive setback requirements than the village commercial district, which doesn't have any front yard setback requirement. It seemed apparent that to give the addition project the most flexibility in looking at different options, moving closer to the street was probably the direction they were going to go in. So looking at the zone change to the village commercial to allow the addition to go sort of on the front portion of the library, moving closer to the street, was something that we wanted to consider. And then looking at the comprehensive plan, it does outline in the goals and recommendations, expanding the village commercial district on the borders in areas that, it really makes sense. And when we looked here, seeing that there's some town-owned property, it's a service that we would want people to be able to walk to, and you would want easy access to that. Letting that development build closer to the street becomes more accessible, more walkable. Having that area on Pine Street, the village commercial zone, really capped off by sort of a notable location and service like the library and senior center seemed to make sense. So that was really the reason that we brought it forward, and it's now here for public hearing. It went through the planning board public hearing process where there were no real recommended changes. So if there's any other questions, happy to answer. Otherwise, that's pretty much it.
Do we have any members of the public that want to address this issue? No? Any council members have any questions? We can talk about this for a while. Closes public hearing B. Public hearing C, to consider an ordinance amendments to section 1831, definitions, section 18-106, schedule of uses, and section 18-131, home occupations, to amend zoning and performance standards for homestays. That's Kyle again.
Yeah, just a brief overview. The way that the ordinance currently handles short-term rentals in Orono is through something called homestays, which is a type of home occupation, similar to other types of home offices and home businesses. But our ordinance really looked at homestays and short-term rentals in a pretty narrow field of view, where it only allowed these short-term rentals if it was a single-family home and the home was owner-occupied. And as services like Airbnb became more popular, we began to realize that the ordinance was a little outdated and it didn't really capture what people were already doing in town in regards to short-term rentals and what they wanted to do with their properties. So we brought the matter to council and we looked to amend the ordinance around short-term rentals and homestays. And what we landed on was allowing homestays in really all types of dwellings. So whether it's owner occupied or non-owner occupied, and it doesn't just have to be a single family dwelling. It could be the rental of a unit in a 2-family or a multi-family dwelling as well. So what we did with the ordinance was split it into 2 types of homestays really, where you have homestay 1 are your owner occupied situations, and homestay 2s are your non-owner occupied, where the homestay 1s, similar to a home office, would only be required to receive a permit through the code enforcement officer. They were looking to operate that. And homestay 2s, which have a little bit more of a potential for an impact on the neighborhood, like say a home business where you're bringing people to the property. Homestay 2s being the non-owner occupied short-term rentals. There's less oversight there. So those would be required to go to the planning board for review. So they're all allowed, but the ordinance does create a bit of an extra step of review process for the non-owner occupied types, just to kind of double check that everything will be in place so that hopefully no negative impacts would happen on any residential areas. Other than that, they would have to abide by all other home occupation standards. Based on our last council committee meeting and the planning board public hearing, we did add in for this draft the local agent provision that we had on the rental registration ordinance amendment a little while back, where any of those non-owner occupied short-term rentals with property owners who lived away from Orono would be required to have a local property manager overseeing the short-term rental. Again, just to provide some more oversight and hopefully protect from any of the potential issues that could arise. That's, I think, pretty much sums it up. If there's any questions, happy to answer.
Do you have any questions from the public? No hands? Any counselors? Any questions from counselors?
Not a question, just I'm really glad that we're moving this forward in the process. I think that we have found a pretty good way to make something people wanted to do legal, and people can make a little income off their properties and lessen any kind of impact to the neighborhood in doing so. So I'm happy this is moving forward.
It's always good to be legal.
Yep.
All right. So that will close our public hearings part of the agenda. The next part is acknowledgements by council members. Would like to start? Megan, any acknowledgements?
Sure.
Okay.
I have a couple. First, I wanted to acknowledge the Orono High School Chess Club, who this weekend in Lewiston won their 3rd in a row Maine State Chess Championship.
Wow.
So congratulations to
Orono.
them. I read a really interesting article the other day that I just wanted to give a shout out to a local resident, Michelle Toder. I don't know her personally, but she's going to ride her bicycle across the country, which is pretty amazing. So April 30th, she's going to start with her back tire in the ocean at Acadia and ride her bicycle across the U.S. and the continental U.S. I think that's commendable, and good luck to her.
Any kind of
I didn't see that in the
For
article.
cancer.
But,
perfect, good. Councilor Wingard.
All right. I'd like to acknowledge the time and patience and learning that Councilor Grenier and Councilor Osher have given me on my first year in council. There's a pretty steep learning curve, and they were very gracious and welcoming mentors to me.
Thank you. Councilor Perry?
Just piggyback on Councilor Wingard's comment, I would like to acknowledge again Councilor Osher and Councilor Grenier for the service to the community. We certainly have benefited from that. I'd also like to acknowledge our acting chair, Councilor Robertson. I really appreciate your willingness to step up and take over tonight. As you mentioned, the Maine state law does not allow the chair to be anywhere but in person at the place of the meeting. So thank you again for doing that.
Thank you, no problem. And I kind of would like to be in Florida.
Kind of cool down here today.
We don't have to hear the birds singing or like, previous.
Right.
years.
So I have a couple of acknowledgements as well. First, I'd like to acknowledge the election crew, our recent election. So Shelley and Belle, I think, leading the charge. And my other acknowledgement is that I'm hoping that we are over the hump of COVID-19. So I'd like to say thank you to the extremely tough and unprecedented decision-making that leadership provided for us for these last 2 years and trying to keep us safe, both the town and the school and the staff. And here's to 2022, seeing if we can get back to some normalcy again, whatever that may be. So I really do want to thank all the people that kind of led us through this as difficult and contentious and as it was, right? But hopefully, fingers crossed, right? We're over the hump. And if we aren't over the hump, at least we know what to do now. So it's nice to kind of sit and take down our masks. So thank you for leadership for that. And that's all I have. Next on the agenda.
I have an acknowledgement or two.
I'm sorry, Lori.
I wanted to acknowledge the turnout in our municipal election. It's always wonderful when people come out. It's important for democracy that we hear the voice of our residents on who they want to represent them. And so I think that's great. We had such a great turnout. And also I wanted to give a shout out or a recognition to the Orono athletic department. They hosted the unified basketball tournament this weekend. And it's just really a pleasure to see our community come together and to make sports available for kids that previous to the unified program weren't welcome into the sporting world of our schools. So it's wonderful. It was the first time that Holton participated this year. Orono's been involved for many years, and it was really a great tournament.
Thank you. Thank you, Lori. Next on the agenda is unfinished business. We have none? No. Unfinished business. And so we'll move on to the consent agenda. So can I have a motion to approve? Approval?
Second.
Megan, second. Jeff.
Council Perry,
In favor?
Council Gardner, in favor, Council Osher,
In favor.
Council Robertson,
In favor.
Council Wingard.
In favor.
And the vote is 5 in favor and then none opposed.
And moving on to new business. So we'll just start order number 2242, order accepting the FY21 Town of Orono financial audit.
So I think that's me. Oh, sorry.
I hope it's.
Oh, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
So yes, I think this is me. At last week's Finance and Operations Committee, we had an in-depth presentation of the audit results. I am not planning to do that same thing all over again. People who are interested are welcome to go on and look. It's posted on the website. but I did think I would very quickly run through items that might be of interest to folks. The first is that the financial audit is undertaken every year pursuant to state law. The town council has engaged Runyon, Kirstine, and Olette out of South Portland to do the audit for us for the last few years. And they definitely put us through our paces. We enjoy working with them. As part of the audit, they are looking for whether or not we're following our internal policies, whether or not we're following generally accepted accounting principles, and also the Governmental Accounting Standards Board's proclamations. So we go through an interim audit in May where they come and test our transactions. And then they come back for a week in September. And this September, we didn't do it live in person. We did a remote audit, which is fun. And I will just acknowledge staff really does a lot of work, department heads and my finance staff. So getting into the audit, I will tell you that the town, so throughout this conversation, I'm going to talk about the town, which are the town tax funded and grant funds. Does not include WPCF, which is our business-like or enterprise fund. That is its own separate fund. We'll talk about that as business-like activities. Governmental activities are everything but WPCF. General fund are the things that are funded through tax dollars. So some terminology just to get us kicked off. Our the town or governmental activities net position decreased about $235,000 from between FY20 and FY21. We still, for governmental activities, have a net position of about $12.5 million. Our business-like activities, so WPCF, actually increased $371,650. As I explained to the council committee, a lot of that has to do with the way we booked the refunding of the bond. So it's a paper transaction, much of that. So the net position for WPCF is a little over 5,025,000, which is up about it's an increase of 100. Sorry, the total town WPCF and town together net position increased almost 1%, 0.77%. When you look at the audit, which will be available online as soon as you adopt it, it is part of the background material. There are 8 or 9 pages at the very beginning, which if that's the only part you read, it's the most important part. It's a narrative discussion of what the numbers mean. You always want to look at the budget, how we present the activities on a budgetary basis. And what you will find is that we expended less than we thought, and we collected more than we had predicted. If you recall, FY21, we were right in the middle of the pandemic and really kind of shrunk down, underestimated revenues in an effort to buffer any economic slowdown, which was being predicted when we were putting that budget together. So we saw revenue come in a little bit higher, mostly related to the municipal revenue sharing, and expenditures less than we had expected, mostly around unspent construction money. So that all carried forward and will be spent. And also programs that we were not able to provide because of COVID. WPCF, for the first time in a very long time, our net activity was actually positive, which is nice to see. Again, a lot of that was how we booked the bond, the premium that we received on the bond. So our revenues, we collected about 8% more than we had budgeted. Our expenses, we underspent by about 10%, but again, that includes, I'm sorry, that's comparing. We increased our revenues from 2020 to 21 by about 8%, and we increased our expenditures between 20 and 21 by about 10%. When we look at fund balance, which is where the town council seems to really like to dig into the audit, we had about $17,000 of unspendable, which gas, diesel are commodities. That was an increase of about $1,600. We have a significant increase in restricted funds. In the past, restricted funds had primarily been just our tax increment financing district dollars. And sometimes some grant funds would be in there as well. When we refunded and we brought on another $2 million of bond money for infrastructure improvement, that money is all restricted. It has to be used for infrastructure. So it made our restricted go up a little over $2.1 million. So I would expect all of that or most of that to be spent by the end of next fiscal year. So that's.
Can I ask you, can that within that budget, can that be shifted to different projects as Rob Yerkson finds?
Yep. So Rob provided an overview of projects to the rating agencies and are part of the prospectus for that went out to the different bond people who were going to buy the bonds. However, it was very clear in there that it's for infrastructure. So as long as it's for public infrastructure, we will be fine. $250,000 of that we had allocated for fiber, and then OTO fiber was going to borrow it from us and pay us back. OTO fiber entered into an arrangement with Otelco where we could get a much larger build out than $250,000 would would be able to provide for. And right after we took the bond money, we have checked, we can use that $250,000 for any infrastructure need or a different fiber project if we so chose. All of those are decisions that we've kind of deferred to see where Rob ends up with his infrastructure plan. We want to make sure we have enough money to fund the things that we were really hoping to take off the plan. Assigned fund balance are those elements within. Did I answer your question, Jeff?
Yes.
Okay. Assigned fund balance are those pots of money that the town council has assigned themselves for future use. So we have money
Or has themselves assigned.
yes,
We have not assigned them to ourselves.
Yes, that's
I
right.
would not assign pots of money.
This is what happens when an English. Yeah, I'm just saying.
It's a little tweak in the
Yeah.
language there.
So you have assigned those funds for future use. The reason that it's different than restricted is that you control a reassignment or reallocation of those funds. Unassigned fund balance grew for this audit by about 1.5 million. And that sounds like a lot. It actually puts us comfortably within the 15 to 20% that we are required to have, that our auditor wants us to have. It was much needed that when we went through the process of floating our bonds, we heard very clearly from the rating agencies that our unassigned fund balance was getting too low and that we needed to stop eating away at it. So this was a good change for us. I would caution people in thinking that it's a windfall because it really gets us back to where we should be. So the other pieces that council are always really excited about is the fact that our collections are right on par with where they were last year. They increased 2.6% or $6,200 for tax receivables. And the collection rate actually increased from 19.15% to 19.17%. Up is always good. And I also talked to you about our cash on hand. I think what's really important about that is that we have we have $10.3 million of total deposits at year end. And our invested funds were at 1.5 million. The important piece of the audit is that everything that we had invested was properly collateralized. Everything that was invested in US treasuries and US agency instruments, except for $27,000, which was invested in an A- instrument. So when we look at the audit, as Tom Perry would say, it's a clean audit. And there were no items of significant deficiency, which you always want to look at. That's bad. Don't want that. But the auditors, when you hired Runyon, Kirstein, and Olet, you asked them to provide comments about best practice. So at the very end of your SAS letter, you have two items. One was that when the staff made the calculation for the value or the liability for accrued compensated absences, they pulled the July 1 wage rate as opposed to the June 30 wage rate, so it overstated our liability by 3.23%. What makes me happy is, for once, it starts with although not material. I mean, anytime you can get a comment that is although not material. The other item is a little more complex, and that is around cash accounts. We have several cash accounts. We have been working to consolidate some of them, but in many cases, the cash accounts are there for ease of reconciliation. When I have a cash account, for example, one that my rep dumps money into, I really don't want that commingled with what Informe dumps money into, because then I'm trying to reconcile a lot of transactions against multiple reports in one account. So I'm going to talk to the auditor a little bit about that. I did push back a little in the note that you'll see in the audit, but I will just say, if those are the two comments I'm going to get, I think we're doing very well. And I would again commend my staff. Does that work, Mr. Perry? I can't even hear him, but I like it.
Are we ready to move on?
You need a vote.
We need a vote.
Councillor Perry,
In favor?
Councillor Gardner, in favor. Councillor Robertson, in favor. Councillor Wingard,
In favor.
Councillor Osha.
In favor.
And the vote is 5 in favor, and there were none opposed. All right.
Moving on to order 22-43, order authorizing the town manager to reimburse the University of Maine Police Department $43,036 for Maine Criminal Justice Academy Basic Law Enforcement Training Program reimbursement as required by state statute 25 MRSA 2808. Do I have a motion?
Move approval?
Second.
Move approval and secondary.
So the reason this is on the new business is because it's a lot of money. And I hadn't talked to you about it. But we really don't have a choice. So,
Well then.
so we go through a hiring process in the police department, and we select the most qualified candidate who meets our philosophy best in terms of community policing. We found an awesome candidate who has been through the academy, which reduces the time that they are not patrolling for us significantly from sometimes 1.5 years down to about 6 weeks. While I was saddened that we would take an officer from the University of Maine, because we collaborate so much with UMaine, and they're a good partner, and everybody desperately needs police officers these days. We really ended up with a high quality candidate. But in doing that, we are now responsible to reimburse UMaine for the MCJA reimbursement that the statute requires. When I first started, there was no reimbursement, and little towns were like a mill. You'd go work in a little town, they would send you to the academy, you would then get hired to a bigger town, and the little town just started again. And then we went through this process of having to calculate exactly what it cost us. And we get 100% reimbursement for the first year. And what we learned is that it costs little towns a lot less than bigger towns because we paid so little. So the academy heard small town complaint and created this standard reimbursement rate. And so for the first year, and it goes anniversary date to anniversary date, for the first year you pay 100%, and then it goes down by 20% until you get to the end of the 5th year, which turns to 0.
Sounds like a student loan.
Just so you are aware, this will end up as an unbudgeted line item in the police department budget at year end. It will either put us in the red, and I'll ask if we have money up other places to cover the budget, or it will just be a cost of doing business in the police department.
So I point out that even though it's expensive, we saved on the overtime that we normally pay,
Oh.
sending somebody there.
Hands down, that when we are able to pick up somebody who has already gone through the academy, we save money. We also will pay this officer the $10,000 signing bonus that we pay all officers that come through, but we still would calculate with $50,000 in, especially with the backlog of the academy, that we saved a lot of money. The other thing is we were able to find an officer that clearly identifies and values community policing the way we do.
It's nice to be on this end of the equation for a change, because we've been receiving money from other towns and departments for a while. We are short-staffed over there, and I know that adds a lot of stress to staff. So it'll be nice. It's money well spent.
And that brings us all the way up to only being down to 2.
Good. Good. Anybody else? Comments? So we need a vote.
Councilor Perry,
In favor?
Councilor Gardner,
In favor.
Councilor Osher,
In favor?
Councilor Robertson,
In favor.
Councilor Wingard.
In favor.
And the vote is 5 in favor and there are none opposed.
Okay, moving on, order 22-44, order authorizing the town manager to sign and execute an agreement with Maine Earth of Hampton for the Westwood Drive Sewer Improvements Project in an amount not to exceed $326,825 with funds drawn from the WPCF Infrastructure Reserve. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
This would be Chris and Rob.
This is coming.
Do we need to put Rob up on the screen? Let me see.
Good afternoon, Chris Pruitt, WPCF.
Yeah. Hey, Rob. Because
So Westwood was identified in our master plan quite some time ago, actually. It's one of the smaller areas that collects groundwater that causes us to bypass. In the beginning, they started with the big neighborhoods, big ticket items. But we're getting down to the nitty gritty, and this is one of the smaller ones that are left. It's Upper Westwood. Westwood has two legs. The first one from Goodrich down to Main Street was rehabbed a while back when they did the high school, took out the roof drains, but they didn't do the Upper Westwood area. So as far, it's only going to come down as far as Goodrich. I think it's 1,400 feet of pipe, 5 manholes. And that's old clay, 8-inch clay line, which is the worst that's out there. It's done work for us in the past.
So this is the project that I talked to council about, that we did a reference check on the low bidder.
Right.
That was approximately $27,000 less. We had our own experience several years ago that was not positive, and the current reference check would not indicate a change. So we worked with Mandy to look at the bid tabulations for the second low bidder, who was Maine Earth, and they did pass the reference checks.
Is there anything else that we need to know?
Just that this was in the budget.
Do we have a timeline? Do you know when that project's gonna start? So we,
I think it's going to start as soon as it can, I believe.
so as
I
soon
think
as
it's
the-
his only job. this summer.
So Rob, can you just take us through the general construction timeline process that we use?
Yeah, so once we award the project, we'll set up a meeting, pre-construction meeting with the contractor. They'll present us with a scope of work and a schedule. And that's when we can start letting residents know what the timeline is. Depending on how the project works into their schedule, the thing that we're dealing with right now is materials. So it may take them some time to get the pipe that they need and the structures made and things like that. So they won't want to start the project, end up having to wait for pipe for a while. So some of those other factors may play into when the timing of the project happens, but we'll know a little bit more of that once we get past the award phase.
Is it going to impact the traffic at the high school at all, Rob, or is that above the high school?
I guess we're hoping that this is a relatively small project, so we're hoping that this thing gets done before we have to worry about school traffic, but either way, we'll make sure that piece of Westwood stays open during the project. If they end up proposing a schedule that goes into the school year, then obviously we would be having a little bit more conversation about why that has to be.
Thank you. Thanks, Rob. Are we ready for vote? Yes.
Council Perry,
In favor?
Councilor Gardner, in favor, Council Osha,
In favor?
Council Robertson,
In favor.
and Council Wingard.
In favor.
And the vote is 5 in favor and there are none opposed.
Great, moving on to order 2245. Order authorizing the town manager to enter into an agreement with Haley Ward of Bangor, Maine, for a community facilities assessment in an amount not to exceed $55,000 with up to $20,000 funded in FY22 from the Professional Development and Technical Assistance Reserve, and the remainder from the as yet to be approved FY23 capital facilities budget. And do I have a motion?
So this has been a discussion for us for quite a while. When we were actually undertaking last year's budget discussions, Councilor Wingard brought up this idea of instead of tackling a huge known expense at the Keith Anderson and other issues at the fire station on North Main and the Public Works, former Public Works facility, that it would make sense for us to first understand what we need for community facilities and also a general budget for what we would need to bring them up to a reasonable code or to fix the things that are wrong with them. So this project has two distinct pieces. The first piece is really looking at the needs assessment piece, and the RFQ that I have already shared with town councilors really talks about trying to work with the community and our stakeholders to figure out what are the general needs. Are there other ways for us to meet those needs that don't involve, for example, putting $1 million into a building? Are there other uses for those buildings that, whether in town ownership or not in town ownership, would be a better use and for the community? So that's one piece. The other piece is actually taking a look at those facilities to tell us in general what we would be looking for. And a lot of work was done with the Keith Anderson House. We've had John McCormick volunteer his time and considerable talents working with Councilor Gardner and Councilor Perry and Mitch to really understand what's going on in that building. But one of the things we realized is, depending on what we're going to use the building for, different things might need to be done with the building. Councilor Wingard worked with me. We put together an RFQ and put it out. We got responses from two very capable firms. We interviewed those firms and really connected with Haley Ward. Felt like they understood the scope. Really were putting an awful lot of attention into the stakeholder and the public communication. I think had a process that we thought would really get us through. So this is using up all, but we will have $15,000 left in that reserve, and there were some other things that council wanted to do with that money. So I've worked with CES. They are fine with taking $20,000 for a scope of work through the end of this year, and then $35,000. If council agrees, though, you're agreeing to spend $35,000 next year. Yes.
Any discussion?
Looking forward to moving this forward.
The company we're talking about is going to have access to any of the engineering material that has already been done, I would assume, which will save them some time and energy and hopefully save us some money.
Yes.
And
if I could I just really want to thank Councilor Wingard. He's given a lot of time and energy and probably would not have gotten this far without him. So much appreciated.
Well, it was really interesting team Sophie put together. So I'm super excited to have this go forward.
And the only comment that I have is talking to some people on Penobscot Street, and they really want to be part of whatever happens at Public Works.
And
So,
and North Main Ave, I've gotten people who really want to be part of what happens.
good, okay.
Yeah,
So
hearing a lot.
Yeah, here I'm hearing,
Anderson
I'm
Center,
hearing a
people
lot
have
of
things to say.
people, I'm hearing a lot of chatter, so I'm glad that, and this is what I've been saying, is that it's in process, and just hold on. We'll get back to you when we know what's going on.
And in general, I think that it's very healthy that instead of whatever counselors happen to be on council at one moment in time deciding the future of all of these buildings and what the community is going to get from them,
Yeah,
that we get some technical guidance in making a decision that works.
right. It's their neighborhoods too, so yes. Okay, are we ready for a vote then? I would say. Yes?
Council Perry,
In favor?
Council Gardner,
In favor?
Council Osher,
In favor?
Council Robertson,
In favor.
Council Wingard.
In favor.
And the vote is 5 in favor and they're none opposed.
All right, moving on to order 2246, order authorizing the town manager to execute an agreement with the Maine Department of Transportation for the locally administered Orono Heads Up Stillwater Avenue Sidewalk and Pedestrian Crossing Improvements Project, the acronyms, at an estimated initial cost of $100,000 for project development with an 80% state reimbursement of up to $80,000. And this, I am told, is raw. Oh, move approval. Second.
Second. Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so the town has been awarded a grant through the Heads Up Pedestrian Safety Program to fund a project on Stillwater Avenue in the area of between Godfrey Drive and the mall entrance to provide pedestrian facilities on what would be the east side where there is no sidewalk now. This project would construct a sidewalk on that side and create 3 crossings, one at the beginning, one at the mall entrance, and one at the end. The project spans to the town line. So the $80,000 and $20,000 match the town is committing to now is for funding of preliminary design and right-of-way work, which would then move into the DOT work program as about a $400,000 construction project. We would still carry for the construction projects a 20% match, but that would be 80% covered by the Heads Up program. So a great opportunity to make some much needed improvement out in what is that segment of road is the busiest segment of road in the town of Orono. So having some quality pedestrian facilities in that area makes a lot of sense.
You could add some variety to your morning walks.
I often go that way and then go down that other road. Yeah, that's a much needed project.
Yeah.
What do we think of the timing, Rob? The study this year and the actual construction the following year?
Yeah, the preliminary design and survey and all those sorts of things, right-of-way acquisition if necessary, will all be taken care of this summer with the plan to build it next summer. Yeah, so we'd be looking at 2023 to bring it online.
Yep, great.
Any further discussion? Ready for a vote?
Mm-hmm.
Council Perry,
In favor?
Council Gardner, in favor, Council Osher,
In favor?
Council Robinson,
In favor?
and Council Wingard.
In favor.
And the vote is 5 in favor and there were none opposed.
Okay, moving on to order 2247, order authorizing the town manager to execute an agreement with INC Systems Engineering of Scarborough in an amount not to exceed $11,400 to upgrade the WPCF system control and data acquisition SCADA system with the funds to be drawn from the WPCF Capital Equipment Reserve Fund. Do I have a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
That's you? Or you want me to start?
So our SCADA system, the software for that system, as we talked about last week, operates on Windows 7, which I'm pretty sure we're the last 7 in town. The reason that it hasn't been changed sooner is because the new updated software won't run on 7. We need to have 10. And the software's online. The SCADA system allows us to fine tune the process with control. It's kind of a balancing act. It can be done manually, but you kind of have to be there 24 hours a day to do that. SCADA does that for us. So it's very important part of the system. It also does a lot of monitoring, including our alarms. I've never counted, but we probably have a couple hundred different alarms between the facility and the pump stations. So the SCADA is the one that gets us out of bed. Works quite well. The software is only part of it. The rest of it is all PLCs, Ethernet. That's really the brains of it. The SCADA just allows it to see all that information and react with it.
Given the requirements of our licensure, we would either have to put people at the plant 24 hours a day or have SCADA. So Chris sees this as a
This is
really large expense. I see it as a money saver. And we have plenty of money in the reserve fund. I think I quoted you a little over 200,000 when we met.
I think I said in committee last week, we've had me at Windows 7.
That's- ouch.
It's worked well.
Yeah, that's all you had to say. Any more discussion? Ready for a
Thank-
vote?
Council Perry,
In favor?
Council Gardner, in favor, Council Osher,
Favor?
Council Robertson,
In favor.
and Council Windor.
In favor.
And the vote is 5 in favor and there are none opposed.
Thank you, Christie.
Nice job.
Moving on to order 2248, order authorizing the town manager to enter into an agreement with Connectivity Point Design and Installation of Auburn, Maine to update the audio visual equipment in council chamber in an amount not to exceed $88,400 paid from the town's coronavirus local fiscal recovery funds, also known as the American Rescue Plan or ARPA funds. Do I have a motion?
Move approval?
Second.
Sophie, you want me to just go ahead and start?
I do.
It is hard not to see your eyes from remote, but that actually brings up the point as to why we are needing to upgrade the audiovisual equipment in the council chambers. So the coronavirus and going remote, when everybody was sitting at home on their own computers, it was easy for people to see up close and personal. But now that we're doing hybrid meetings, we've really lost a lot of that personal connection with the meetings. So the upgrade that we are proposing here puts in high definition cameras. It increases the size of the presentation TVs that you see from the dais, and actually moves our existing TVs to the back section so that when we are working in workshop, we have another presentation system available to us. Another big upgrade that this is putting in place is it has an automated meeting controller, so to speak, so that it actually can control the cameras so that somebody who is working behind the scenes to produce the meetings only has to keep track of a couple different things, and it doesn't have to keep track of which speaker is speaking and which camera is on and switching and zooming in and out. It also includes an upgrade to the audio system that is actually computer controlled, so that if you're sitting on the dais, which once this is upgraded, you guys will be back on the dais. Any paper flipping or flopping or rustling, that will actually be muted out and we'll still be able to hear comments clearly. We'll still be able to go out via Zoom, and we'll have a tablet that we'll be able to use in the council chambers that will allow us to say, I'm doing a council meeting and here's all the presets, or I'm doing a council workshop and here's all the presets. So hopefully this will make it a lot easier for everybody to kind of run a meeting, and so that we're not dependent on one or two people who know the ins and outs of the system. The other piece to know about this, since this is the ARPA funding, this is the first ARPA funding project that we have embarked upon. So it required us to kind of do a little bit of extra research in terms of what the requirements are in order to do this. But so there are some additional requirements associated with federal funds, and this contract meets those.
The only question I have, Belle, and you've probably answered it before, but I'm just rethinking it. Will the public also be able to Zoom in, I mean, if they wanted to. So we will still do hybrid meetings. as
Yes,
we-
so
Okay,
the hybrid meeting will still exist, and we'll have council kind of as one feed as it is now, but it will be kind of a different, you'll have a window directly for the speaker rather than trying to look with the owl and hope that the owl has like zoomed around and found the right person who's talking. And then any other panelists who might be remote would be, so it would look just like this. And then council would actually see it on the TV screens above the dais, but they're going to be significantly larger. So you'll be able to see the Zoom feed as well. And then the whole system is significantly easier when it comes to presenting materials and all sorts of stuff. The
So
CPDI did our cable installation update, and they said that they're very experienced with doing these Zoom room kind of updates as well.
So a member of the public who wanted to do public comment but was on Zoom would be able to jump into our television? That's
Yep.
great.
Yep, they would be ported in.
Well, we'll get a lot more interaction with the public if they can zoom in safely. I like
Yeah.
that. I'm gonna have to be on my best behavior though.
Yes, because we've got, these are gonna be upgraded. We're
I,
not just-
you know, I once said something unkind about our previous governor and the mic was not sensitive enough to pick it up. But in the future, I'll just have to be on my best behavior.
can we still have that little button that fixes our appearance? Can we still do that? You know, slide the little button.
Zoom
Now
will
that
still
I'll-
have that.
Blob. A fuzzy blob.
I think it's exciting and it seems like it's the future. It's the way of the future.
So
Thank you, COVID.
I will just commend Belle because we asked her to solve a problem that we didn't even know we had before COVID. And she has done a great job finding the specs, talking to people, and this should be a vast improvement.
And in case it escaped anyone in the public's attention at the top of this presentation, these funds are federal dollars.
Yes, and I mean, one of the things they wanted us to attend to were ways to ensure the continuity of transparent government as we move forward. So this makes sense. Not that I want to say we'll have another pandemic, but
No,
Just in case.
just in case.
we're ready for it.
Great.
Ready for a vote?
Council Perry,
In favor?
Council Gardner,
In favor?
Council Osher,
In favor?
Council Robertson,
In favor.
and Council Wingard.
In favor.
And the vote is 5 in favor and there are none opposed.
So moving on to order 2249, which was the item that we added to council agenda. This would be the order authorizing the town manager to apply for Lieutenant Joseph P. DiBernardo Memorial Foundation grant funds in an amount not to exceed $10,750 to purchase personal escape systems for the fire department and further to accept said funds if awarded and authorize the town manager to expend said funds in accordance with town purchasing policies. So,
Motion.
and do we have a motion?
Move in favor.
Second.
So,
We all moved it.
yeah, very well moved. The Lieutenant Joseph P. DiBernardo Memorial Foundation provides grants to fire departments that need personal safety equipment and training. So the request you have would allow the town to purchase 17 personal escape systems to replace our current equipment. And I don't know how often people might be walking by and you see the yellow tape by the window on the second floor of the fire station. That is the training bailout window. And the tape helps protect people as they bail out over the side. But when we talk about personal escape systems, they are a series of ropes, carabiners, things that would allow a firefighter who was trapped in a second or higher story building to get out of the window. We currently have systems that are nearing the end of their useful life. So these are required personal protective equipment that we're going to have to replace one way or the other. And I would love to be able to spread the word of this foundation and give them credit for funding $10,727, rounded up to $10,750 of much needed equipment that will keep our people safe.
Any questions?
No.
Is this equipment that they wear?
So the equipment is like in a bag. If you
Oh,
see it when they go in, they've got it with them. And they step into the harness, and it's rope, special rope and carabiners that allow them to learn how to flip themselves out of a window and gently rappel down the side of the building. Yeah, they've offered to allow me to do that. That's one I have not yet taken them up on.
Yeah.
But someday I might feel brave.
No, don't do it.
Please don't throw yourself out a window.
Cheryl, I'd just like to thank our staff for being alert to these grant opportunities and purchasing essential equipment that we otherwise would see in our local budget.
Funded.
I will commend our deputy chief, Kevin Sirwa. He has really come on board and identified the things we need and finding creative ways. When I say I have no money, find a way. He has been able to at least find opportunities.
Good for him.
Right, and it's all really safety.
Yep.
That's important. Ready for vote?
Council Perry,
In favor?
Council Gardner,
In favor?
Council Osher,
In favor?
Council Robertson,
In favor.
and Council Wingard.
In favor.
And the vote is 5 in favor and they're none opposed.
The next agenda item is council committee representative reports. Yes. Want to start, Megan?
Sure. Oh, gosh. And of course,
This is when it all goes blank.
yeah, it's doing weird things while it scrolls. Okay, so the March 7th, the Comprehensive Plan Implementation Committee discussed the disorderly property ordinance revision, which I always, when I was a new counselor, would hear that phrase and think that I would just imagine like a messy yard. But that's not what it's about. It's about a place that's having parties. So that language will be moving forward to public hearing in April. Do you want me to talk about community development?
Yeah, would you?
Okay.
Unless Jeff, you hadn't planned to do that, right?
No, I do not bring my notes for that.
I don't have a ton of notes on it though, but I can discuss what we discussed.
Yeah.
So community development met that on that same night on the 7th. We discussed the community facilities planning RFQ, which we moved forward tonight. We reviewed the final signage and letterhead mock-up, and for anyone playing along at home, if you looked at the agenda for tonight, our new letterhead has made its appearance, and thank you to staff that worked on that. Excellent job. We reviewed the guidelines for issuing council proclamations and resolutions, and we're very pleased with that language, and that is it. DEI. Oh, right. Wait, that's not on this for this. I don't have that agenda. I can discuss the fact that we are going to be looking at language for a charge for that committee.
We made
Significant progress on
Progress.
that, yes.
Yes.
So we are going to be looking at draft language very shortly for an official charge for that committee.
Great.
So finance and operations, we discussed the most recent audit in great detail with a presentation from the town manager. And you had a brief summary of that tonight as we accepted the audit. And we also heard from our water pollution control facility director on the new computer system that he needs to efficiently run that operation. And we move that forward and approve that tonight as well.
I think the last one is the Environment Committee. We met on February 23rd. We said we lost one of our committee members, Dr. Bree Berry, who accepted a teaching position as Assistant Professor of Environmental Studies. So we've got a great committee. She was a wonderful addition to the committee. Her advice and counsel was much appreciated. We discussed pretty much at length the Community Resilience Grant that Megan has and Bella are working on, and some targeted areas for funding for this grant, including municipal energy assessments to establish baselines and continuing our Weatherized Orono project that we hope we can offer residents in the fall of 2022. So we are building a foundation right now of funding, and we are still working on that. And that was our meeting. All set? Good. The next item on the agenda are future agenda items and items of concern. Does anyone? I have one. Nothing. So future agenda item, just a reminder that next week on March 21st, we will have our inauguration and seating of 3 new counselors, Sonia Berthasell, Leo Penny, and Rob Blairway. So that will happen next, officially, that will happen next Monday. And is there anything else? And Lori has her hand up.
Thank you. I presented in early January that I was interested in seeing our town focus on how we might make more affordable housing in the town. And I found my fellow counselors receptive, and I got comments from people in the audience about that. And when I was reviewing ways that we might do that, I saw that in January 25th, Maine Housing announced something called the 2022 Community Solutions Grant, and where towns can put in a proposal to get up to $500,000 in funding that will help the town as they embark on affordable housing projects. So the money can be used for a variety of things, but they're mostly focused on projects that the town has come up with. So we are not at the place where we've come up with a project, but there's been discussion about various pieces of land that we have. You know, there's places that were supposed to be housing developments that are now empty lots of land because the developers didn't complete the projects, and the land is owned by the town. To get the Community Solutions Grant, it's a rolling grant, so there's not a deadline, but there is a finite amount of money. So the towns that have already been investing efforts in figuring out how they might build new affordable housing, or those towns that have affordable housing that's in distress and is in danger of being condemned or taken out of the housing market. So those are the 2 ways that you could use this money. We don't really have any affordable housing that's in distress. So for us, it would be investigating places where we could put affordable housing and coming up with what the town would like to see. And so I'm presenting this as something that perhaps the town could be, maybe have another committee, or maybe we could have it be, I'm going to stay on the Orono Economic Development Committee, even though I'm not on the council anymore. So that could be something that could be taken up by OEDC. I've talked to other members of OEDC informally. They said that sounded like something that OEDC might do, where we would query the town residents about the goals, and so that we would be able to put it in. So it says a local needs assessment needs to be done. we'd have to show that there's a specific geographic area we want to serve. And certainly since we have the university and most people who work at the university don't live in Orono because it's too expensive, that we can, I'm sure that there's data available or they easily pulled together to show that what the need is. We have to then identify collaborating agencies who we're working with and any individual consultants. It's wonderful that we already have a consultant that's talking about, that's going to help us identify their buildings needs and whether or not they're going to meet our needs to repair the buildings. So in the same way, there'd be some investment the town would have to do to get prepared to apply for this funding. But the funding is significant, and often with having a goal, that's how we get rolling on what we want to get done. So anyway, so I just wanted to present that as a future agenda item, and anyone who's in the audience wants to talk with me about that, please let me know. I'm at least for another week, have an email address in the town, but I'm also the representative of the town, so you can reach me through the legislature and also through OEDC.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is public petitions. Do we have any public petitions? And public comments. Next would be public comments. Anybody? Any comments from our audience?
Nope, nobody has raised their hand.
Okay. I guess the next item on the agenda is adjournment. So moved. You ready for a vote, or do we have a discussion?
No discussion.
No discussion.
Looking
Okay.
forward to supper.
Thank you all.
I think we can just say good night. Thank you all. Good night, good night,
Yep.
Lori. Good night, Tom.
Thanks, Cheryl.